What is the biggest red flag you ignored because they were hot? Story 1. I dated a girl for a few months who was astronomically attractive and way out of my league. At first, I couldn't figure out why she wanted to hang out with me until I realized she was an absolute idiot. Every interaction left me staring blankly into the distance, trying to comprehend how someone could have made it to their late 20s thinking the way she did. The story I always tell about her was the nail in the coffin for our brief dating streak. We'll call her T. I said, I used to do hot yoga, but since I moved home, I haven't found a convenient place to go. T replied, Oh, I can support yoga for religious reasons. I asked, What? Okay, why? She explained, well, first, it was started by those terrorist guys, you know, the ones with towels on their heads. I said, Are you saying yoga was started by Muslims? She nodded. Yeah, and all the poses are for them to pose in the likeness of their gods. I countered, Gods like a tree, and child's pose, and downward dog? She waved me off. Whatever, and all the chanting is really satanic. When you chant like that, it takes you to an empty place where the devil can enter your body. I shook my head. So let me get this straight. You believe yoga was created by Muslim Satanists to pose in the likeness of their gods? She said firmly, Yeah, so I just can't support anyone who does yoga. I took her home and immediately called my roommate. He said, If you keep dating her, I'm going to roast you relentlessly. Another friend warned me, if you continue to date her and be intimate with her, it would be considered SA because she's obviously legally intellectually disabled. I told her, I don't think this is going to work out. And shortly afterwards, she started dating another friend of mine. She was a complete moron, but my God, she had one of the best bodies I have ever seen. Before we continue, do us a quick favor, smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. He had his own name tattooed on himself. I brushed it off as quirky. Surely it was a joke, right? There's no way a real person could be that comically narcissistic. Long story short, he eventually started playing recordings of himself singing and playing guitar while I was blowing his whistle. The cherry on top? He never reciprocated, and he was by far the worst lay I've ever had. I didn't even know it could be that disappointing, and I'm not even going into the emotional letdown. I'm ashamed to admit that our relationship lasted almost a year because I was in denial that someone so good-looking could be such an irredeemable pile of crap. Edit. Just to clarify, the listening to his own recordings incident happened at the very end of the relationship, not throughout. By that point, I was already pretty sure he was a narcissist, and that finally confirmed it. I let so many red flags slide because I thought he was going through a hard time and needed support. But he made it clear that no one mattered to him but himself, a message he even displayed on his body with that tattoo. I hope this stands as a cautionary tale for anyone inclined to nurture troubled people. There are truly selfish people out there who will shamelessly take advantage of you, and the inner goodness you're holding on to might not actually be there. Story 3. I met this woman shortly after I got divorced, an absolute 10. We went out for drinks, and during the conversation, she asked if I'd ever been arrested. I laughed and said no, then asked her the same. She laughed too and said yes. I figured it was something minor, but no. It was for domestic violence. She was so stunning that I didn't even flinch. We dated for a few months. One day, I came home and found she had moved in without telling me. She acted like it was the best surprise ever, and when I didn't respond the way she hoped, she lost it. She broke a few things around my house, screamed every insult she could think of, grabbed her stuff, and stormed out. After that, I had to change the locks, the garage code, my phone number, everything. The hot to crazy scale was 100% accurate with her. Story 4. I once dated a guy who turned out to be controlling. He tried to stop me from wearing certain outfits, wanted me to stop hanging out with male friends, and pulled a few other stunts that were just plain toxic. He could be pretty nasty with the things he said. But oh my God, he was tall, shredded with blue eyes and perfect blonde hair. Anytime he looked at me, I'd just melt. When I finally wised up and dumped him, my friends thought I was crazy, but no man is ever going to dictate what I can and can't do. Story 5. He was dumber than a rock. I swear he was the walking inspiration for Derek Zoolander. Walking and screwing were about the only things he could do without breaking something or causing chaos. He attempted to wash my dishes with laundry soap. Couldn't figure out a two-knob shower to get hot water at my place until he asked me so. Could not, to save his life, remember where I lived or what apartment I was in, even after coming over 5 times. Thought the U.S. president had the same unilateral powers as a monarch. Confused the 4th of July with President's Day, assumed his work schedule was wrong, and didn't go in. Consistently told me our star signs were plutonic together. Still unsure what he meant. Upon learning shelter dogs are always fixed, asked why there were so many puppies. I made it through 3 weeks. If I'd stayed, I'd have needed a heroic drinking problem just to cope. Good Lord, though, he was hot. I seriously didn't want to admit he was also profoundly dumb. Story 6. One night, he and his best friend told me they believed in soul sharing, which apparently wasn't considered cheating, and that they shared every other girl he dated. The best friend also made a few creepy advances toward me, both while I was living with my ex and after we broke up. Once, I went to a club and found him with another girl on his lap and was basically told to leave them alone. I'm the monogamous type and had repeatedly made it clear I wasn't interested, but it didn't stop him. He was absolutely beautiful and did some modeling, but hygiene wasn't a priority at all. I remained friends with him, and when I moved in with a guy I ended up in a serious long-term relationship with, my ex had an empty apartment for a while. He was desperate for a place, so my ex let him move in for 5 months. There were shampoo and conditioner in the shower that never got touched. Not that the guy brought his own. My ex stopped by a couple of times and no other products were added. My ex was also a filthy mess. He even got an STI from his stepsister, but he was much better at hiding it. Story 7. I'll give a TLDR of a nightmarish situation I was caught in for years. I started seeing a girl who worked as a bartender at a restaurant chain where I was a regional director. I was young, she was attractive, and I ignored the obvious warning signs and rules. Shortly after hiring her, we began getting together. She left the man she was dating to spend time with me whenever I was free or in town. Red flag 1. Soon after, I took a general manager position and moved in with my brother. We bought a house near work. Not long after, the girl needed a place to stay because she couldn't get along with her sister. Blinded by her looks and the amount of alcohol we consumed regularly, I let her move in. Red flag 2. We went out constantly. I had plenty of money, and we drank together, had dinner, and enjoyed ourselves nearly every day. The problem was, she was an extremely unstable drinker, and nights often ended either with incredible fun time or violent arguments in which she could become physical. Red flag 3. Not long after she moved in, she became pregnant. She decided we would have a child, even though I really didn't want one. Both of us were attractive and healthy, so I knew our son would likely be good-looking and healthy, and I hoped we could reconcile and work on our differences. Mind you, I had only known her for maybe 3 months at that point. Red flag 4. After our son was born, she constantly came home late, claiming it was work, but I caught her at bars with random men. Her ex-boyfriend was even parked at the end of my driveway at 3 a.m., talking to her. She was repeatedly cheating while I worked hard and took care of our son. At that point, I had essentially become a babysitter and bill payer, completely stripped of my dignity, though I stayed to ensure our son was cared for. Red flag 5. It all came to a head after I left her. She showed up drunk at my new house at 4 a.m., smashed all the windows on my car, and flattened my tires. When I came outside, she turned on me with a knife and attacked me. The wounds were severe enough that EMS had to field dress me due to substantial blood loss. Red flag 6. And this was just the tip of the iceberg. Long story short, don't have kids with someone untrustworthy. Don't date cheaters. Don't let alcohol cloud your judgment. And stay far away from hot, unstable partners. Now, 3.5 years later, I haven't seen my son because her family essentially cut me out of his life. Tired of fighting, I gave up after her mother called, saying they wanted to move forward and would never pursue me for anything, including child support. In hindsight, I made the wrong choice, but it's too late. I now face the courts for back child support, losing 60 to 65% of my wages for an indefinite period. Story 8. He was very old-fashioned. I'm talking serve me dinner after you cook it, do the dishes, and be with me every night in bed, even if you have a fever or had a rough day. After we broke up, I contacted him because he had my vintage crock pot that belonged to my grandma, who had recently passed away. I told him he could just leave it outside and I could pick it up, but he never responded. He also had a pattern of never staying single. He was in a serious 3-year relationship and met someone just a few days later. After we broke up, he started dating someone 3 days later. From what I know, he's still the same way. Edit. I stayed with him because we were both personal trainers and he was attractive. I tried to see something that wasn't there. He actually broke up with me, but I'm grateful he did. I'm now engaged to the love of my life. Story 9. She grew up in rural Missouri with a completely batshit conservative mom. She believed vaccines caused autism, was convinced dinosaurs were still roaming the deserts of Africa, and firmly believed humans came from Mars. No big deal. We dated for a while, got married, had 2 kids, and she cheated multiple times. Hands down, she was the hottest woman I've ever been with. But at what cost? Edit. We've been divorced for almost 5 years. Story 10. She was playfully jealous of every other woman in my life, even my therapist. She even told me, if you're happy with me, you shouldn't need any therapy. Eventually, it stopped being playful. Anytime I complimented another woman, even on TV, she would start crying. Over time, I cut ties with all my female friends and stopped going to therapy. In the meantime, she would let other men text her because she felt sorry for them and didn't want to cut them off after rejecting them, even though they were still trying to get in her pants. One of them was a total creep who would tell her he was better looking than me and that he wanted to impregnate her. One night, after she got drunk, she called her mom and asked her to help cut that guy off. She said she would, but she never did. Eventually, she arranged a date to cheat on me. I sensed something was wrong because of her attitude, and I stopped her. Somehow she convinced me it was my fault for not trying hard enough to make her feel loved. After a couple of those shenanigans, I broke up with her. She had a new boyfriend within a month, someone who had been talking to her for about 6 months. She's Catholic. She has amazing cakes, but never again. Story 11. 6 months into dating this woman, I came home from dinner with my kiddo, something we did every Thursday evening, and she knew that. I told her I was home and headed straight for the shower. About 10 minutes in, I heard the front door open and things being slammed around the house. I jumped out, thinking I was being robbed, when she burst into the bathroom, ripped down the shower curtain, checked behind doors, and screamed, "Where the hell is she? Where the hell is she? I felt the hood of your car and it's cold. You didn't see your kid. You were with some bish." I showed her the receipt from our dinner, and she eventually calmed down. We talked it over, and she admitted she just knew something was off. Things seemed to settle, and we went to sleep. Then I woke up to her grabbing my hair and punching me in the face over and over. I threw her off, yelling for her to stop, but she kept insisting she had found evidence I was cheating, though she couldn't show me anything. We got into a big fight, and I ended up crashing on the couch while she stayed in bed. Lying there, I just kept thinking, what the hell was that? And right then I knew I wasn't going to accept this. It was over. I woke up on the couch to her giving a blowy, and she kept saying how sorry she was in between, how she didn't mean it, and that she trusted me. The rest of that day turned into a free-for-all of bedroom fun where I could do whatever I wanted. And that's why I stayed for 3 years in a narcissistic, physically abusive relationship. She was extremely hot with an amazing figure, and she knew exactly how to move. When she finally broke up with me, I was shattered. Within a month, she was with another man, and I was in therapy for a year. Story 12. She had bad spending habits. When we met, she was already 600 pounds in debt, which her parents eventually bailed her out of. Once we were married and had our own house, her spending habits weren't her parents' problem anymore. They were mine. 15,000 pounds of debt later, she blamed every bit of it on me, despite most of it being spent on constant holidays and crates of clothes she never wore. According to her, it was all my fault because I was out of work for 1 month, years ago. We've been separated since February, and I've never had so much spare cash in the bank, but I'll admit, it stings that I can look at her cakes anymore either. Edit. For those asking me to share pictures, please stop. We may be separated and not on great terms, but I'm not about to put her out there like that. Story 13. This is gonna sound like a humble brag, but it's really not. Not long after my divorce, I met this woman, absolutely gorgeous with an amazing body. Me? I've basically got Jack Black's build and the face of your average millennial fat guy. Brown hair, glasses, nothing special. We hang out, and after a couple of dates, we get a little close. Afterwards, she's almost overly complimentary, telling me she's never had anyone make her feel that way before. She said most guys just used her and never bothered to focus on her. For me, it was awesome. It felt good to be appreciated for something I've always quietly taken pride in. But she just wouldn't stop talking about it. Every day, every conversation circled back to it. And honestly, I was lonely. So I took it as a huge ego boost. At one point, she casually said she didn't think she could live without it. I figured it was just flirting. Then I saw her again. We did it again, and afterwards she was raving, this time saying she couldn't wait until we moved in together so she could have it every night. We'd only been seeing each other for 3 weeks. I laughed it off, but she got a little mad. I apologized, saying I just hadn't thought that far ahead yet. I told her, of course, I wanted to be with her, but I was still freshly divorced and not thinking much about the future. She stormed out of the room in a huff and told me to go home. I left, and we didn't talk for a couple of days until she texted me to apologize. She said she just had a bad history with guys and didn't want to feel used again. That confused me, since she'd always focused on how different I was and how I treated her in ways no one else had. I pointed that out, and she got mad again, but then told me to stop fighting her and just go to dinner. So we went. Over dinner, she brought it all up once more, and I finally told her I was starting to worry she was obsessed. I said it was making me uncomfortable and that we needed to step back. She didn't take it well. She freaked out, stormed off to her car, and I stayed behind to pay and apologize to the server. When I walked out to the lot, she tried to run me over. I jumped out of the way, and she backed up, screaming that if I thought she was obsessed, then she'd make sure no one else could have me, that no one else would get the great times I gave, only to have their lives ruined when I left. Yes, she actually said that. Luckily, a cop who had just arrived for dinner saw everything and arrested her on the spot. Story 14. The biggest red flag I ignore when a potential partner is hot is that she's hot. I know that sounds ridiculous, but in my experience, conventionally hot women are not my style. There's nothing wrong with being hot, but I know I can keep up with most of them. Too often they've been catered to their whole lives, treated like pretty princesses who can do no wrong, and I check out immediately. It's just too much time, energy, money, and mental effort for someone whose looks aren't going to last forever anyway. Give me thick, funny, and intelligent. That's my speed. TLDR, being conventionally hot is a red flag I'll always ignore. I know that means I'm probably passing up some solid partners, but I'll take my chances. Story 15. She told me she was a business consultant, but it turned out she just had sugar daddies across the country who sent her money. She would visit them once a month, but claimed they never did anything physical. Her first weekend with me, she had a full-blown psychotic meltdown, twitching and speaking in tongues. When I asked her what her dream job would be, she deadpanned, "I think I'd probably want to be an assassin." Somehow, we lasted a few months. That ended when she borrowed my car without asking and somehow crashed it into the wall of a parking garage at 2 a.m. She insisted she was sober but didn't want to file a police report because her license was suspended. When I saw the car, there was even a cigarette burn in one of the armrests. Afterwards, she tried to get me to commit insurance fraud to cover the damage. But holy crap, what a body. And the fun times were insane. Story 16. I met a woman who within just a couple of hours was in my bed. Yes, she was hot. We had met at a venue where a friend had driven her, so I drove her home the next day around lunchtime. Her house was large and very nice. I left thinking she was not only hot, but also well off and 35, my age at the time. She couldn't get enough intimacy either. I thought I'd hit the jackpot. The red flag started showing up soon after. She was actually unemployed. Turns out she hadn't driven herself because she didn't have a car or even a license, and that friend was really just her taxi driver. The house belonged to her parents, who had taken her back in after she got out of jail. She was massively bipolar, and like many in a manic stage, saw no reason to stay on her meds because she felt so much better without them. But until she mentioned her jail time, I was still finding ways to overlook everything just to keep her in bed, which of course she definitely wanted. Story 17. All of his friends were completely into him. He loved it too, and clearly thrived on the attention. I mean, everyone, both his guy friends and his girlfriends, wanted to be with him, and he knew it. I got tired of being just another one of his groupies. He liked me too, but I always felt like I had to fight for his attention. So I ended up making out with 3 of his friends, 2 guys, 1 girl, as a power move to try and make him jealous. Eventually, I even boinked him in front of those same friends just to get it out of my system and prove that I was one of the very few people who could reach the top of the groupie pile and get him. I had a lot of issues at the time. I was in a phase where I only got validation through attention and loved knowing people wanted me. So, yeah, I did all that just to know I could. Definitely not recommended. I didn't like how I felt around him. I always felt like I had to perform, be the hottest, coolest, funniest person in the room just to keep his attention. Now I'm happily married to a man who is completely obsessed with me and isn't remotely interested in anyone else on the planet. It all worked out. I don't have to perform to be loved. I don't have to fight for attention, and I can just be, and he just wants me. It's a much better feeling. Story 18. She faked a heart attack while I was casually studying in the library with college friends. I was about an hour away, so I booked it to see her. I kept calling to find out which hospital she was at, but she didn't answer, which freaked me out even more. We'd only been dating a few months, so I didn't know her family's numbers, but I drove anyway. I took a wild guess and went to the hospital closest to her home. I asked the receptionist if she was there, and she said no. Confused, I left, and then finally got a call from my girlfriend saying she was at the hospital I had already been in. I told her I had asked the receptionist, and they said there was no record of her. She explained she had just left 5 minutes earlier. That's when I started getting suspicious. Talking to her more, she told me she had never mentioned it before, but she has a weak heart. That surprised me. She goes jogging regularly. I asked what her parents were doing to help, and she said not to bring it up with them because it would stress them out. She then invited me over, which I did, and she gave me incredible fun times. I brushed the heart issue under the rug. About a month later, I realized that in just a few hours she had been intimate with me. She went for a jog and even played basketball with neighborhood kids. I asked her how her heart was, and she kept dodging the question. When I asked again, she got frustrated, saying she didn't want to feel sad about her weak heart anymore, and then within 5 minutes of talking about it, tried to give me blowy. I said no and drove away while she yelled, "We are through." Story 19. I met this girl when I was 18. We did some fun things, and eventually she tried to get more attention from me. She called and claimed she was pregnant with my child. I immediately asked how many lines were on the test. She said 2. I replied that it should be 1. Then she said, "Oh no, it's 1. I pointed out that it was actually 2. She said, "I think it's 2. I finally told her, "I actually don't know, but I know you're not pregnant," and hung up. She realized I didn't fall for it. Years later, when I was 23, she contacted me again, and we had some fun. She told me she was actually married. We continued seeing each other for years, but it was mostly just physical. She wasn't getting any from her husband. She had married him at 19, and it was more of a friendship marriage. Eventually, I broke it off because I started feeling bad for the guy. About a year later, she contacted me again. She said she was divorced because she got caught with some other guy. We had some fun a few more times, and then she disappeared from my life once again. About a year later, she came to me wanting to just talk. She told me she was married to a new guy. I asked her if she had cheated already. She said no. I asked because she had wanted a relationship with me while she was still married to her first husband. I declined, and when she asked why, I said, "How can I trust you when you've cheated for years?" She went silent and realized I never would, so she married someone else. A few months later, she wanted to do it with me again, and that's when it became clear she was a serial cheater. Over time, we started talking and taking walks, trying to get to know each other on a more mature level, something she hadn't done when we were younger. She realized I was actually a very nice guy. Eventually, she told me she had been diagnosed with BPD. She is now on medication, has quit alcohol, and has lost excess weight. So she wanted to start coming over again, and I told her I didn't feel comfortable with it. She kept pushing, talking me into it, and I gave in. But after about a month, I realized how bad it felt. I knew that if we talked about it, she would get her way, so I blocked her on everything, and eventually deleted my social media, except for Reddit. I haven't heard from her since, but I'm certain she's cheating with someone else. This whole experience opened my eyes. It showed me that some people just can't be helped. What started when she was around 18 has continued, and she's now almost 30. She has a nice personality and is genuinely sweet, but she's a walking red flag when it comes to trust and cheating. I'm not innocent. I made my own choices, but my reasoning was always she's going to cheat anyway, so why not with me, since I enjoy the intimacy? She was a wild, crazy bedroom goddess. Story 20. They had way too many best friends of the opposite gender. Normally, I'm not the jealous type, but I've learned something from experience. Men often label women they desire or who have rejected them as best friends, usually because the woman friend-zoned them. In my first relationship, my ex was cheating on me with two different women, both of whom were supposedly just friends. In my second relationship, I tried not to carry over that mistrust and didn't usually feel threatened by the other women in his life. But he too had many female best friends, and all of them were absolutely beautiful. At times, I still felt uncomfortable with how close he was to them. He'd always offer to buy them dinner, drop me off first if we were all together, then drive her home afterward, because she lived the farthest away. There was one time we all went away together, just the two of us, his two best friends, one guy and one girl. The next morning, we were talking about where to go for breakfast. His female best friend and the other guy had spent the night on the pull-out couch in the hotel suite. She was still in tiny shorts pajamas, and he was just in his pajama pants, no boxers. They started play wrestling, and I did not find it amusing. We would fight about these things, but not because I said anything, because I would shut down and stay silent, just watching how he treated his female best friends. Sometimes, he even treated them better than me. Over time, it made me feel really insecure. This ultimately contributed to our breakup. I should have told him how I felt about his female friendships, but I didn't care to argue. Now I don't ignore that red flag. Story 21. Any pleasant, romantic, sweet, or loving thing I did for him, he would treat me like crap. But the moment I showed zero interest in him for being such a jerk, he would treat me like royalty, pulling out every trick in the book to romance me and make me forget how badly he'd behaved. Ironically, when I tried being sweet back, it turned him off. The more I ignored him and rejected him for being a total a-hole, the more he wanted me. It became this strange, exhausting game. After a while, I grew tired. I didn't want to play anymore. Story 22. Alcoholism. Looking back, I didn't really think about it at the time, but about a month into the relationship, it hit me. We literally drank every single night we were together, and we were together every single night without fail for 3 months. She would either pick me up from work with a case of beer in the back, or I'd visit her place and she'd already have a bottle of wine going. The biggest red flag should have been the first 2 nights we ever officially hung out. I picked her up from a friend's house because she needed a ride home. The entire way she kept telling me how badly she wanted to be close with me, yet she could barely keep her eyes open. I told her how uncomfortable I was because she was so drunk and I was completely sober. The next day, I brought it up and she teased me, calling me a wussy for not going through with it. It was a huge conflict with my morals. It took me 3 months and almost $3,000 later, but I finally walked away. I'm glad I did. No one is worth that kind of mental pain. Story 23. I dated a charismatic man, let's call him Eddie, because that's his name. Eddie was the definition of life of the party. He had wild stories for days. Whenever we sat at a bar, he seemed to know someone everywhere we went, but it was always men. Most of his stories involved a crazy woman, though I didn't fully realize that until later. Eddie ended up getting blackout drunk and violent one night. He aggressively kept me in his apartment for hours. I genuinely thought he was going to harm me. I tried calling 911 and blurted out the address as fast as I could, but he grabbed my phone before I could finish and sinisterly told the dispatcher, "She's fine." He took my phone and my keys and pushed me into walls. I eventually escaped. He was charged with assault, false imprisonment, interference with a phone during an emergency, and disorderly conduct. Lesson learned: don't trust guys with more than 10 crazy exes in their past. Story 24. It was Valentine's Day, and I drove her about an hour and a half to a nice Indian restaurant in the state capital. We didn't have any restaurants like it near our town, and she had been flirting with vegetarianism, so I wanted to support that. After a very pleasant meal, the owner came to our table to ask how everything was. He complimented her necklace and asked if he could see it. While casually remarking that it was very nice, he set another necklace on the table in front of her and said she might look even better in this one. Surprise, it was my gift. I had planned the whole thing. On the way home, she was very quiet. When we got back to my place, she said she had to take care of some things and left rather quickly. About half an hour later, she called me and admitted she was confused by the whole evening. She said she hadn't had a nice time and worried about us because we were so different. She wasn't used to eating fancy food or dressing up just for a meal, and since I went through all that trouble, she assumed I must have done something wrong. On the way home, she had even thrown the necklace out of the window while continuing to drive. I calmly asked where she had thrown it and spent about 2 hours going up and down that stretch of road. Around 2 a.m., I finally found it in someone's yard. I simply gave it back to her and told her that I loved her and that she had nothing to worry about. A few months later, she left me and confessed that she had cheated on me at least 6 times. She admitted she wasn't attracted to me, but that the intimacy had been great, and she wanted to be single to pursue other things. Story 25. He told me he was writing a book about himself, viewed through the lens of the women he'd slept with. At the time, I didn't realize it, but that was a huge red flag. Classic narcissist behavior. He seemed to see other people, particularly women, as little more than characters in his life story. He also insisted he was a devout Christian, yet said things that implied he thought God and he were more like peers. I'm not religious myself, but I think I understand how that chain of command is supposed to work. Story 26. One of the first things I remember her saying to me was to check out her camel toe. She had a tiny camel tattooed on her pinky toe. She had been an exotic dancer once and was 7 years older than me, recently divorced for the second time. Both exes were military. All my friends saw through her and warned me I could do better, but I was a naive 19-year-old and thought I knew better. She was insanely hot, and yes, a little insane, but for the most part she was sweet. We only met up for about a month, and thank God, I wore protection. I came out mostly unscathed, just a bit poorer and missing my favorite hat, which she stole. Story 27. The biggest red flag was that he had 2 kids he wasn't allowed to see yet. Wanted to get me pregnant too. Keep in mind, I was 18 and planning on going to university. He wanted to trap me with him. He was 30. He insisted that not being able to see his kids was because his 2 baby mothers were crazy. His words, not mine, and claimed all he wanted was to see them. It turned out he was an abuser. He would try to get close to be me while I was sleeping. I was often woken up but pretended to be asleep so it would be over quicker, because he didn't like being with consenting women. He got me kicked out of my home, told me that being essayed by others meant I must have been asking for it, and wouldn't let me see my family or friends. Yet he was allowed to flirt with people in front of me. He told me he loved me after just 1 date. I wasn't allowed to go out with friends, have any male friends, or do anything fun that didn't involve him. He constantly accused me of cheating. He would make his hands shake and claim it only happened when he was being lied to, which wasn't true. Once I got in trouble for talking to my brother because my doctor was concerned I might have a brain tumor. I was scared and upset, and instead of offering support, he gave me the 3rd degree, accused me of cheating, and did the shaky hand routine. He told me I was making the whole thing up rather than being there for me. He was genuinely terrifying, and I ended up with PTSD. Every night I spent with him ended that way. But when I tried to initiate intimacy, I was told I was disgusting and that no one could possibly find me attractive. When we broke up, he posted all my deepest secrets on Facebook, attacked my family, and threatened that if they defended themselves, he would reveal my deeply personal secrets. Feff you, Gareth, you're a despicable facsimile of a man. Scarily enough, that's not even half of what he put me through. I knew it was abuse but was too scared to leave. I had no support, and no one looked out for me, which is why he got away with everything. I should have reported him, but I'd been through a trial before and knew the system often failed survivors, especially in he said, she said cases. Story 28. I met up with this girl on a night out, took her back to my place, and we had a night of fun. We continued seeing each other and eventually got together. Around that time, she confessed she had mental health issues. I overlooked it because she was really hot, and I knew I was clearly punching above my weight. Flash forward 8 months into our relationship, I sent her a good morning text, as I usually did, and she replied, "Who's this?" I assumed she was joking, so I brushed it off and continued the conversation. I didn't receive a reply, which was unusual for her, so I sent another text about 6 hours later, still nothing. Around 8 p.m., I got a call from an unknown number. It was her Nana, who she lived with. She said, "Don't panic," but she has forgotten the past 10 months of her life. To cut a long story short, we had gotten together during those 10 months. Effectively, she woke up one morning thinking the current date was 10 months earlier. She didn't remember me, didn't know she had a boyfriend, and was completely disoriented. It was very upsetting and confusing for both of us. Story 29. While cleaning our apartment and vacuuming, I found a notebook under the bed. I didn't know what it was or whether it belonged in the closet or the office, so I took a quick peek. The first and only page I opened was a handwritten mantra about using intimacy as a tool for control in a relationship, complete with scenarios and dialogue. We didn't last long after that. The relationship had many problems, but instead of ending it outright, she was incredibly attractive, and I was a naive fool in love for the first time. I slowly shut down until it dissolved. I used to despise the man she started dating immediately after me, who married her just a year later. Many years, and I'd like to think some gained wisdom later. I now just pity him if they are still together. Story 30. The biggest red flag I overlooked because she was attractive was that we have completely different attitudes toward life. I want to travel the world, be a bartender and a rock and roller, and play video games. She wants to settle down, have a family, and talk about our 400,000. She's wonderful and tries to compromise for me, but honestly, it isn't working. 2 years into our marriage, I realize she is far more mature than I am, and I don't see myself reaching her level of maturity anytime soon, if ever. The hardest part is that she is madly in love with me for reasons I don't understand and doesn't think she can find anyone else. She's amazing, but I just don't think I'm the one for her, and the more time passes, the more I wonder if I even want to be. When we got married, I imagined it would be exciting being close all the time, playing video games together, teaching her guitar, nights on the back porch with single malt scotch and classic cocktails. Instead, I found myself in bed by 9 p.m., up by 6 a.m., watching NBC and drinking cheap Moscato. We clearly had completely different expectations of each other. Story 31. So this gorgeous woman slid into my DMs while she was still married. Even though I knew better, I entertained it. One day, she blocked me out of nowhere, a classic guilt move. A few days after her separation, she unblocked me. We started talking again and quickly made plans to meet. Next thing I know, we're dating. That's when the real fun began. She told me she was a practicing witch, thrived on attention from random men online, had an OF that made Hustler look tame, and her young son had severe behavioral issues, including violent outbursts. Naturally, I married her, because obviously none of the toxic behavior from her last marriage would carry over to ours, right? Wrong. Shocker, it all did. But now I'm a happily divorced fool, and wiser for it. Story 32. She started talking about kids and moving in together within 2 weeks of meeting me, and her divorce wasn't even final yet. A few weeks later, we had a minor disagreement, and she went completely bat-crap, took back her house key, changed the locks, and so on. A couple months later, I ran into her friends in public. She assumed I was using them to get to her. I wasn't. They were just friendly and wanted to stay in touch. She must have been a little paranoid because she later confronted me at a bar and caused a huge scene, saying the most hateful things I've ever heard. At one point, she apparently woke up one morning to find her trash cans knocked over, assumed I had been there in the middle of the night, and installed security cameras. The whole situation still bothers me, but she's been blocked for over a year, and it's obviously better that I'm out of it now. Story 33. I only dated this guy for 3 months, but the red flag I missed was that he had a DUI. He owned a successful restaurant and was very handsome, and he loved to cuddle. I didn't find out until the end that he hadn't gotten his license back yet and that he drank every night. He had driven to my house many times while tipsy. At the time, I was a 911 communications officer. One night, an officer pulled him over while he was tipsy, but because he was so close to home, the officer let him go. That's when I realized we probably shouldn't be dating. A year after we broke up, one of my EMS friends called to tell me that my ex had passed in a drunk driving accident. I thank God every day that I wasn't in that car, but I also wonder if I could have made a difference in his life. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.